founding of Rome, Romulus and Remus. Imagine, in the misty early days of Italy, along the banks of the Tiber River, two helpless infants are abandoned, left to the elements and to fate. Their names are Romulus and Remus, twin sons of Mars, the god of war, and a princess from the fallen kingdom of Alba Longa. Their birthright, royal yet fraught with danger, brings them here, left to die in the wild, victims of a family feud. But destiny has other plans. As dawn breaks, a she-wolf, majestic, fierce, and maternal, descends upon the twins. Instead of harm, she offers them protection, nursing the boys as her own. These unlikely brothers survive, growing strong, fearless, and ultimately determined to claim the land and become home. Years later, driven by ambition and a sense of destiny, the twins reach a fateful decision. They will build a city, a new home for exiles and warriors. Disagreement takes root. Romulus wants one home, Remus another. Their rivalry, once playful, turns deadly. In a final confrontation, Romulus strikes down his brother Remus, staining the city's foundation with eternal blood. This founding myth, a tale of survival, sacrifice, and destiny, gives Rome its first lessons. A city forged in violence, yet destined for greatness. In these dramatic origins, Rome grows, shaped by power struggles, determination, and a relentless drive to thrive. And thus begins the story of Rome, a civilization that would, like its founders, rise above adversity and carve its name into history.
All right, welcome back to Ancient Mediterranean History. We've been doing a series on both ancient and classical history from that part of the world. We started out looking at Mesopotamia, the Achaemenids. We've looked at Greece. Now we're moving more directly into Rome. We've seen some of it, how it connects. But now we're going to look at from the early Roman foundation on into the late republics. We're going to look at the foundation of the republic itself. We're going to look at some of the mythology around that. And as we start that, I just want to bring something out from one of the ancient Roman authors. His name is Livy. And it's the study of history is the best medicine for a sick mind. For in history, you have a record of the infinite variety of human experience plainly set out for all to see. And in that record, you can find for yourself and for your country both examples and warnings. Find things to take as models, base things rotten through and through to avoid. So it's one of those ancient proverbs that, though it comes from a pagan world, it would certainly match up with biblical ideas and understanding what's the difference between right and wrong. We know the beginning of wisdom is fear of the Lord. And if we apply all these things to our biblical worldview, we come out with an understanding that we can look through history, both biblical history and all of human history, and find good examples, bad examples that are still applicable today. So our introduction, early Rome and late Republic, we're going to go through the myths of the founding of Rome. We're going to look at Rome's early monarchy. We're going to see the transition here and see the early republican structures. We're going to see Rome's expansion and the Punic Wars. And we're going to see the internal strains that come about that end up breaking down the Republic. And from the Republic, we will move into the Empire proper. We're going to see the rise of populism and the collapse of the Republic. And that's really what brings about the Empire. And just like we will hear at the end, we're going to hear the story of Julius Caesar. We see that as a transition moment, and it transitions from the Republic to the Empire, bringing about Augustus. So SPQR, you may have seen that around. It's an acronym for the Latin phrase Senatus Populescus Romanus, which it translates to the Senate and Roman people. It was an emblem of the Roman Republic's governance and is still used as an official symbol of Rome today. So our introduction, our objective here is to explore the legendary origins of Rome, trace its development from monarchy to republic, and examine the dynamics that led to the fall of the republic. So primary sources are important to us. We need to be aware of them. You've already been introduced to our buddy Livy. And Livy, he offers this detailed narrative of Rome's origin and republic. So the good thing and bad thing about Livy is sometimes it sounds kind of legendary. And the legendary portion of this is what makes scholars go, yeah, we're not real sure about our buddy Livy here. We think he's mythologizing some of this. And I think he's a great representative historian and author of how people thought in that day. So I don't want to discount him at all. So we move to Plutarch. You've been introduced to Plutarch in previous lectures. He has this thing called Parallel Lives, and he gives us the lives of Romulus and Numa and others as well, and he provides character-focused insight. Virgil, he wrote the Aeneid. This is this epic poem that mythologizes the Trojan origins of Rome. We'll get into that. That's an important one for us to understand. Polybulus, he has a histories, Greek historian who writes on Roman politics and the rise of the Republic. And of course, our buddy Cicero, he is the greatest example of the traditional Roman Republican, and the things he writes moving towards the end of the Republic are very important to us to understand the Republic, to understand Rome, understand this transition from Republic to the imperial period, where now you have an emperor rather than a senate in control. So interesting things to consider for us today. So the founding myths of Rome, Romulus and Remus, then we'll go into the Trojan origins. So Romulus and Remus, the story of twin brothers, and they're raised by a she-wolf, and the legendary founding brings about the legendary founding of Rome by Romulus. So a couple themes that we'll see, fratricide, which is murder of your brother, divine lineages, and symbolic role of violence in Rome's origin. And in the Trojan origins, Virgil's Aeneid, it brings about Aeneas as the ancestor of the Romans, and it emphasizes the themes of endurance and fate, and fate's the big one in there. So here's this story, Romulus and Remus. It's a story of those two brothers, and it's this dramatic account of this symbolic beginning to the foundation of Rome. So according to legend, the twin brothers were born to Rhea, and she's this Vestal virgin. She's the daughter of a deposed king. Their father was Mars. Mars is the god of war. This establishes this divine lineage that the Romans found so important. So Greeks liked these ideas as well, probably even more than the Romans did, but the Romans find this legendary mythology of their foundation really important to their communal psyche. They find it important to their patriotism. And when they look at their founding, it really is one of those things that brings about this idea of why are we here? How do we continue on? And it becomes the heart and soul of the Roman Republic in many ways. And you ask yourself, why could Rome last so long? Why could they accomplish what they did? And a big part of it is simply that they had this idea of divine past and divine destiny as well. So, again, the father of Mars. So that's used to justify Rome's martial and expansion, justifies their ambition. So here's what we get. They're abandoned by the Tiber River and left to die. The twins, they're miraculously saved by a she-wolf. And the she-wolf comes along and nurses them until they were found and raised by a shepherd. So the early part of this myth emphasizes the themes of survival and destiny and foreshadowing, and specifically foreshadowing Rome's emergence as a powerful civilization that's born from adversity. So as the brothers grow, they discovered their noble heritage and decided to establish a city. So however, their ambitions clashed because they have a disagreement. And the disagreement simply they can't decide which hill to build their empire on. So they fight, and the fight culminates in Romulus killing Remus. So that's where we get this act of murder, and the symbolism behind that within Roman mythology suggests Rome's strength was rooted in sacrifice, and internal conflict was accepted and a recurring theme in its history. So by shedding his brother's blood, Romulus established Rome with himself as the first king, and that shapes the legacy that intertwined power with violence and loyalty with rivalry. So I look at this story and I find it very interesting to go back to the biblical account of Cain and Abel and kind of scratch my head and say that the biblical idea that would come about from this is sadness and missing the mark. It's sinful. It's a disgrace that God hates, and yet we see in this Roman account how it gets lifted up and used to mythologize and glorify the idea of murder, even because that's how we were founded. That's how we get our first king. So that's how we end up in this specific location. So when we look at this, Romulus' role as the founder of Rome gets idealized. It's in subsequent Roman culture. He is not seen only as the king, but as a warrior leader who defined early Roman society with principles of discipline and conquest. And we are going to see this idea all through the Roman Empire, this idea of the disciplined society where people know their place, and they don't get out of their lane, so to speak. So the myth of Romulus and Remus encapsulates Rome's origin story as one characterized by divine favor or a struggle for power or both, and the enduring theme of survival through strength. So when Rome goes out, when they lose a battle, they don't give up. What they do is they go back and they gather up the next force, and the next force will be larger, and they go out and they do it again. So it's survival through strength. They sort of, in a way, always had this chip on their shoulder of feeling like they needed to survive, they needed to expand. So historians have long analyzed this myth for insight into Roman values and attitudes, interpreting it as both a historical legend and a moral framework that helped justify Rome's often harsh policies and military pursuits. All right, so moving from there to the next idea, which is the Trojan origins. And again, this is highly steeped in this idea of fate. So in Virgil's Aeneid, Aeneas is a Trojan hero. So you remember the Trojan Wars. If we went back to our studies in Greek culture, we see the Iliad by Homer. In the Iliad, we see the Trojan Wars. And in addition to Iliad, there's a number of smaller works that are additions to that larger poem. But essentially, it's the story of the Hellenists coming against the people of the city of Troy, and they eventually are able to capture the city. The refugees from there end up being the people that follow Aeneas and start Rome. So he's the Trojan hero. He's depicted as a legendary ancestor of the Roman people. Fleeing the fall of Troy, he embarks on this divine ordained journey to find a new homeland, and it leads him to the shores of Italy. And throughout this journey, Aeneas embodies the Roman ideals of endurance and pietas and duty. So he overcomes numerous trials specifically to fulfill his destiny. His journey symbolizes both personal sacrifice and a larger fate, intertwining his life's purpose with the foundation of Rome. The link between Aeneas and Rome's origins provides a mythical heritage that resonates with Roman culture and identity. So the theme of fate is central to this story. His journey is not one of free choice, but rather one bound by divine will, dictated by Jupiter, who prophesies Rome's future greatness. So Aeneas, he accepts this idea of this future destiny, and it illustrates the Roman understanding of fate as an unavoidable yet honorable path. His reliance on in the face of adversity and his unwavering dedication to his mission, it serves as a model of the Roman virtue of the Roman virtue of pietas, and it encompasses loyalty to family, to gods, and to country. So he becomes a tremendous example for them in their story. So Aeneas's legacy, as imagined by Virgil, was meant to reinforce Rome's identity as a city with a divine origins and a purpose in the world. His journey symbolizes the endurance required to build an empire. So that's aligning Rome's history with this grand cosmic order by portraying Aeneas as a dutiful ancestor who sacrifices personal happiness for a higher calling. Virgil crafts this a foundational myth that reflects Rome's self-image as a civilization destined for greatness, guided by the virtues of duty and endurance. So this myth would shape the Roman view of leadership, honor, and the burdens of destiny, providing a cultural and moral framework for generations. So when we look at the Trojan origins, we see Livy and the Roman identity. Livy uses myths of Rome's origin to create a unified national identity which depicts early Romans as resilient, virtuous, divinely chosen, justifying Rome's authority and expansion. The Trojan origins, Virgil, he connects Rome's ancestry to Aeneas, linking Rome to the esteemed Greek cultural heritage. So Aeneas's virtues of duty and endurance emphasize Rome's divine mission and moral superiority. So, like with any culture, that's how you use your stories. And you use the stories that you use to define your society that is who you will become. And the generations to follow will follow the virtues that you find as important to pass on. So, cultural prestige, Greek connection. So by associating Rome with Greek myths and heroes, Roman authors gave Rome a prestigious lineage. This linkage legitimizes Rome's rise as a civilization with ancient roots. So, and that becomes their identity. All right, so let's jump into Rome's early monarchy and transition to the Republic. So the overview of Rome's 7 legendary kings, from Romulus to Tarquinius. There's highlighting figures like Numa, and this is the lawgiver. Servius, which he is a military and social reformer, and the tyrannical rule of Tarquin the Proud, and the revolt led by Lucius, and that's the beginning of the Republic. So, broadly speaking, we have these 7 kings, and each one is unique and has very specific attributes, and that's what's going to bring historians to really question the authenticity of these accounts. Problem is, it could just be a natural political progression of one king doing a single thing, the next one following up with that and doing the next thing that's important. So we're just going to have a very brief overview here. We start out with Romulus. You've met our buddy Romulus. He's Rome's legendary founder, the first king. He's credited with establishing Rome and its earliest institutions. Romulus famously killed his twin brother Remus and named the city after himself. So then we get to Numa. He's known for his wisdom and piety. He organized Rome's religious practices. He established the priesthood and is credited with the foundation of many of Rome's sacred customs and temples, supposedly promoting peace and stability. The next one is Tullus, and he's a warlike king. He expanded Rome's territory through military conquest. He's best known for his victory over the neighboring city Alba, and that really cements Rome's dominance in the region. So Ansus, he is the grandson of Numa, and he balanced war and peace, expanding Rome's territory while fortifying the city. He's credited with building Rome's first bridge across the Tiber and the port of Ostia, and he's which enhanced trade. Lucius, he is Rome's first Etruscan king, and he introduced various Etruscan cultural elements and initiated large public works, including the Circus Maximus. He's known for his ambition and vision for a more powerful Rome. Servius, he is known for his social and military reforms. He recognized Roman society. He reorganized Roman society into classes, and those are based on wealth, and creating a more structured society. He expanded the city's walls and introduced a census to Rome. So when we get to Lucius here, he's known as Tarquin the Proud. He ruled as a tyrant, so he ignored traditions and those Roman customs. Instead, he turns to violence to maintain his power, and he's expelled in 509 BC following the outrage over his son's actions led to the establishment of the Roman Republic. So you can see everything was going pretty well. You get a tyrant, and the tyrant leads to a republic. Tyranny always brings these things out. Unfortunately, in this case, they were able to bring this about. So this brings us to Lucius Junius Brutus. He's the founder of the Roman Republic. He's celebrated as one of the key figures in overthrowing the Roman monarchy and establishing the Republic. He is the leader of the revolt against Tarquin. He is the symbol of Roman virtue, known for his dedication to Rome's freedom. And he put the Republic above personal ties, even sentencing his own sons to death when they were found guilty of conspiring to restore the monarchy. He is the first consul of Rome following the expulsion of Tarquin. Bruce became one of the first consuls, and he established the office of a central component of the new republic's government structure. And he leaves along this legacy of liberty and justice. So his actions really embody the ideals of Rome. And it's these ideas of duty and sacrifice. And his legacy as defender of the Republic's values endures throughout Roman history. So looking at some of the historiography here. Polybius and Livy's perspective is that he depicts Rome's shift from a monarchy to a republic as a moral story, highlighting the Romans' rejection of tyranny and their commitment to civic values. There's a moral foundation. This narrative emphasizes the importance of virtue, justice, and the protection of liberty, with the transition seen as a foundational moment in establishing Roman ideals. The modern historians and historiographical accounts would simply be that of primarily of skepticism. So these contemporary historians are often skeptical about the historical accuracy of Rome's early kings, viewing many as likely legendary rather than factual. And when they say legendary, they find it too easy to have these 7 kings, which each king almost representing a different virtue. Or in the case of the tyrannical guy, anti-virtue maybe. So archaeological evidence, while much of the monarchy period remains uncertain, archaeological findings provide some insight into early Roman society, suggesting that elements of social and political structure may align with these traditional narratives. Let's jump into the early Roman Republic. So the political structure is there's a Senate, They served as a central advisory body. They're representing Rome's most influential families. The consuls, annually you would have 2 elected consul, and they have executive power, balancing each other's authority to prevent autocracy. And occasionally you'd get a dictator, and that would be in times of crisis. A dictator could be appointed with absolute authority, but only for a limited term, generally 6 months, or until the crisis was over, is normally how it went. So, social distinctions, the patricians versus the plebeians. So the social classes divided between the aristocratic patricians and the broader citizen class, the plebeians. The plebeians fought for equal rights and protection, resulting in significant social and political reforms over time. The 12 tables of 450 BC, the first codification of Roman law, ensuring that all citizens had access to public and standardized legal code, laying the groundwork for Roman legal principles. So Livy's perspective here is that he presents early Romans as virtuous, resilient, and he emphasizes qualities like duty, bravery, dedication to the common good. He portrays the establishment of the Republic as a necessary noble response to the corruption and failure of the monarchy, particularly through the story of the last king, Tarquin the Proud. Idealization of the Republic. Livy uses early Republican figures as moral exemplars, and he showcases them as a model of Rome, and specifically Roman virtues, and he reinforces the Republic's superiority over monarchy. So modern historical analysis here. Contemporary historians often examine Rome's social struggles as the patrician-plebeian conflicts, with a focus on their role in shaping the Republic's institutions and social dynamics. Debate exists on whether these struggles enhanced Rome's social cohesion and adaptability, or whether they exposed underlying divisions and would later challenge the Republic's stability. So keep in mind, when we talk about modern historiography, many of the modern historians that write about these things, we'd simply find them as having an alternate worldview from the biblical worldview. We'd find them as being heavily steeped in the kinds of histories that we would move away from. We're trying to focus on primary sources, and we're going to tend to be skeptical, but in a positive manner, and we're going to tend to be less critical when we find it unnecessary, while these other historians, they're going to be steeped in things like Marxism. They're going to be focused on system history, and not systematic, system history, so dialectic history. And in doing that, they're going to apply modern day principles. They're going to force those principles on the past, like Marxism. So when they look at this, they're going to say that this must have just been a struggle for survival within the classes and class warfare. They're going to take those things, and we see the problem with those things, how it's divided people even today by misapplying those ideas to the past. So it's a problem. So social cohesion, resilience. Some historians argue that these conflicts contributed to. Got that in two spots. Rome's early expansion in Italy. We're going to run through this fairly fast. Unification of the Italian peninsula. Rome gradually unified the Italian peninsula through a combination of alliances, treaties, military conquest, bringing various Italian tribes and cities under its influence. Early alliances with Latin neighbors helped establish Rome's dominance in the region and provided military support for further expansion. Conflict and diplomacy. Rome employed both conflict and diplomacy to integrate diverse groups into the Republic. So the Punic Wars last from 246 to 146 BC. So the background here is that the Punic Wars were a series of 3 wars fought between Rome and Carthage, a powerful North Africa city-state, still part of the Mediterranean culture, Mediterranean region, maybe it's a better way to put it. They're in North Africa, they're a city-state, and they are Rome's main rival for control of the Western Med. The First Punic War, it's a focus on Sicily. The war began over control of Sicily, resulting in Rome's first overseas province after defeating Carthage's navy. And obviously naval power was important. Rome developed a naval force to challenge Carthage specifically, making a shift in its military strategy from land to sea power. As you know, if we look back, we can see that was important to the Greeks as well, as it was super important in order for them to repel Persian invasions. In the Second Punic War, this is one of the famous ones where we see Hannibal's invasion of Italy. The Carthaginian general Hannibal famously crosses the Alps with his army, and elephants even, inflicting heavy losses on Rome at battles like Cannae in 216. So the problem with Hannibal was he was a tactician, not a strategist. And he was able to win battles. He's brilliant. He could do more with less. In terms of strategy, in terms of military strategy, he's great. In terms of the broad strategy, he didn't know how to use his victories to gain final control over his enemy. So he was a great general, but he probably needed someone else to oversee the broad strategy. So in this, we do see Roman resilience, because despite significant defeats, Rome's strategy of avoiding direct confrontation and weakening Hannibal's resources eventually led to victory. So the Battle of Zama, that's in 202, the Roman general Scipio Africanus, he defeated Hannibal near Carthage in North Africa, making a decisive victory and ending the Second Punic War. So Scipio there is going to get a second chance at Hannibal much later on. Hannibal has a completely less than adequate military in the second head-to-head battle there, but I would see this as Hannibal is certainly the superior general. Scipio had the superior force, so that at this point really puts an end to the majority of the greatness of Hannibal's career. So in the Third Punic War, we see the destruction of Carthage. Rome initiates this final war with the intent of eliminating Carthage as a threat. The city was destroyed in 146 BC, and its territory became a Roman province. So at this point, we get a shift to empire. The Punic Wars marked Rome's emergence as a major Mediterranean power, with provinces in Sicily, Spain, and North Africa. Rome's expansion brought wealth and slaves, leading to changes in the economy and increased social tension that influenced the Republic's later instability. The Punic Wars established Rome's reputation as a resilient and adaptable military force, setting a foundation for further expansion and imperial ambition. Polybius viewed Rome's constitution as a successful blend of monarchy, which the consuls, aristocracy, the Senate, and democracy, which would be these groups of popular assemblies. He argued that this balance of power created a stable and resilient system, allowing the Republic to endure challenges and adapt as it expanded. So you can see where Western civilization looks at these things, looks at things from Greek society, and could draw those in. And even in the United States, you can see three separations of power. And even within, we have presidency, we have the courts, and we have the legislature system. So breaking up of power. Even within our legislature system, we have a House of Representatives and we have a Senate. And so they're pulling all these ideas from the past and employing them in creating a balanced government. So impact of expansion on social and political structures, concentration of wealth, influence grows from these elite families. And we see the historians debate, scholars debate whether expansion strengthened Rome by enhancing its economic military capabilities or weakened it by creating internal divisions and undermining social cohesion. It's probably both. So in contrast to the instability, others suggest that while expansion introduced new challenges, it has also allowed Rome to develop administrative and military structures, and those prolonged its dominance. So multiple ways to look at it. Probably both things can be true at the same time. Economic and social change. We get some displacement of small farmers. Large estates begin to grow and developed as wealthy elites acquired land from small farmers. This consolidation of land led to the displacement of these farmers who moved to cities. So we get urbanization. When urbanization happens, we get an increase of poverty and an increased instability in society. We get these class tensions, and that's going to bring about these struggles, civil war, things like that. So we get some reforms from the Gracchi brothers. So Tiberius, he proposed land reforms to redistribute land back to small farmers. That basically it's small farmers that had their land ripped away from. These reforms met strong resistance from the Senate and elite classes, leading to his assassination in 133. Gaius Gracchus, his reforms expanded on his brother's reforms, pushing for broader economic and social reforms, including subsidizing grain for the poor and some judicial reforms as well. So Gaius also faced opposition and was eventually killed, marking the violent suppression of reform efforts by the Senate, and we get the rise of populares. So the conflict between reformers, populares, and the traditionalists deepened, setting the stage for ongoing political division and strife. So quick historiographical insight here. We introduced you to Cicero already. Cicero's writings offer firsthand insights into the political power struggles of the late Republic, highlighting his concerns over threats to traditional Republican views. Modern scholars on this period, the historians view the Gracchi brothers as precursors to the Republic's decline, as their reform exposed the Senate's resistance to adapting to Rome's evolving social needs. In addition, scholars argue that the Senate's inability to address underlying economic and social issues contributes to the long-term instability, and it really paves the way for the eventual collapse of the Republic. And as the Republic collapses, we'll see the empire taking over. Okay, just a couple key figures and events. So, generals and militarization of power. Gaius Marius, his reforms professionalized the Roman army. This is going to be important for Rome going forward. So he's made soldiers loyal to generals who provided land and rewards rather than to the Republic itself. Now, when we look at Roman history, that is going to really stand out because you're going to see one general being deposed and he's going to go off, gather his military forces back up, and then come back and continue war. Forces siding with their leaders rather than the Republic itself. Lucius Cornelius Sulla. Sulla's conflict with Marius and his eventual dictatorship in 82 to 79 BC marked a shift towards a military control, and it really sets a precedence for future leaders to use armies for personal power. Then we see this impact of military loyalty. Marius and Sulla's actions weakened the Republic's traditional structures as political power increasingly depended on military backing. Julius Caesar and the end of the Republic begins with the crossing of the Rubicon in 49 BC. Caesar's decision to cross the Rubicon River with his army signaled his defiance of Senate authority, and it leads to a civil war. And then we get Caesar's dictatorship brought significant reforms, including a calendar reform and debt relief, but concentrated power in his hands, and that undermines Republican ideals, which leads to his eventual assassination. So it's really fearing his growth in power, and a group of senators assassinated Caesar, believing it would restore the Republic. It ends up doing just the opposite. So we get this power vacuum, and with the rise of Augustus, we begin that with the Second Triumvirate, and that's the group of three. After Caesar's death, Octavian, Mark Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate, leading to further power struggles. So guess what happens there? It all breaks apart, each one with its own military force. So Octavian later changes his name to Augustus, takes on the name Caesar, so therefore we get Caesar Augustus, and he emerged victorious, consolidating power and marking the transition from the Republic to the Empire. So we'll deal with that in greater detail, First and Second Triumvirate and Caesar's death and how that worked out a little bit more in the next lecture. So, brief historiographical insight. The ancient sources on Caesar, Plutarch and other ancient writers portray Caesar with ambivalence, depicting him as both a visionary reformer and as a potential tyrant whose ambitions clashed with the Republic's values. Somewhat true. Many modern historians emphasize the Republic's fall being rooted in structural issues such as concentration of military power and the influence of charismatic leaders like Caesar. The Republic's traditional checks and balances struggled to withstand these shifts. The leaders like Marius and Sulla and Caesar used popular support and military strength to bypass or challenge Republican institutions. So Rome's transition from the Republic to the Empire is partly Republic to the Principate. So following a century of civil wars, Augustus emerges as the sole ruler, partly because of that second triumvirate and then them breaking apart into civil war. So he effectively ends the Republic and establishes the Principate, the first phase of the Roman Empire. Although Augustus maintained the appearance of Republican institutions, he centralized power and he creates a more autocratic system. So he was brilliant in terms of politics and able to make the Senate that was still there feel like they still had some power. Really, they had no power because Augustus had the support of the people. Augustus had support of the military. And he would make them feel like they have a say, but they really didn't. He portrayed himself as a traditionalist, even though it really wasn't. But he was great at projecting the images that he wanted. Rome evolved from a city-state with a republican government into a vast empire that ruled much of the known world. The shift altered the character of Roman governance and society, with the emperor embodying the unity and power of the state. So, legacy here is influence of governance. Republicans' structure and ideals such as a Senate, checks on power, citizen participation became foundational concepts in the Western political thought. Some historical reflections are that Rome's republic is remembered both as an ideal of shared governance as a cautionary tale of how internal division, social inequality, militarization can challenge Republican values. So these are essentially bringing along the wrong virtues and misrepresenting the Republic is what took place, and gave rise to a single person being in power, removing those checks and balances. So once they removed the checks and balances, the other thing that they did, and we'll talk about, is the decline and fall of Rome was in part due to the loss of Roman identity by giving citizenship to every single person within their borders. Historian and archaeologist Mary Beard makes this case and argues that was the greatest moment of decline. And we'll look at the fall of Rome later, but it's an interesting idea. So here we see a picture portraying the death of Julius Caesar, and now I want to share that account with you. And as always, if there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. And hope you continue to be blessed by our studies together.
The fall of the Republic, the assassination of Julius Caesar. Now imagine, it's the Ides of March, 44 BC. The Roman Senate is filled with whispers and uneasy glances. In the heart of the city, power and ambition are at their peak, but so is fear. The center of it all is Julius Caesar, the man who has become Rome's most powerful figure. Too powerful for some. Despite warnings and ill omens, Caesar strides into the Senate chamber, confident, almost invincible. But something is wrong. group of senators, his former friends and allies, are closing in around him. Among them is Brutus, a man Caesar considered like a son. Caesar looks into his face, but instead of loyalty, finds betrayal. Before he can react, the knives descend. He fights them, grasping at the betrayer's arms, but as the blades sink in, he realizes the extent of the conspiracy. His resistance fades, and with his final words, "Et tu, brute?" he falls. This tragic assassination marks not only the end of the life, but the death of the Roman Republic. The Republic, once a crown system of shared governance, is now in pieces. At this moment, one of human vision triggers the rise of Augustus and the birth of the Empire. In a twist of irony, the very act used to save the Republic ensures its end, transforming